Should he open a gaming space?
No.
Oof. Today we're going to do something a little fun and more interesting than usual. We're going to kind of engage with we try to look through the comments and see if there's sort of like interesting topic ideas and stuff we haven't covered. And one of our viewers is kind of just posing a simple question about whether he should open a store essentially or a business. And before we get into that, I just want to plug at the beginning of the video this time, if you don't mind, you can check us out on Patreon. You can support us for as little as $3 a month, and we have a lot more engagement on there planned, and you're doing a lot more videos like this based on our Patreon versus just cherry picking questions from our old videos. Yeah. Cool. On to the real good stuff. So let me pose the situation for everyone who's watching in as much detail as I can without just basically reading his comment. The situation is this gentleman goes to a Warhammer store in Southern California, and it's allegedly the only tabletop miniature store that you could play games at within roughly a 45-minute drive. It's supposedly a fairly dense area for population density. And there are a lot of other hobby shops in the area or retail shops that do this sort of thing, but they mostly cater to TCGs when it comes to gaming space.
Yep. Common.
And he adds in his comment that he's basically considering partnering with this Warhammer store employee to potentially open a new business, and essentially, from what I understand, is to cater more to the gaming community and have a bigger space where people can play, because there's apparently an overflow of people waiting to play at the shop. And if you've been to a Warhammer store, we'll get into that a little bit later in the video, these are not necessarily like places where you like play games at anymore. And he also adds that this venture wouldn't necessarily need to make money above the costs, essentially like rent and wages and stuff like that. Before we actually answer the question for real, they basically wanted our intake on like, is this a viable business? Or what do you guys think? And before we delve into that, I figured we could maybe break down or almost like define a couple of things first, just for people that are watching. And I think we would start with just kind of clarifying what the role of a Games Workshop actually is today in 2024.
It's true.
Just so there's like clarity, I guess, right?
It has changed. I know a bunch of people that of our vintage still cling a little bit to the good old days, the red carpet GW, where it was the play, old, yeah, where it was the place to do everything. Yeah, it was the place where you learned to paint, where you played your games. It was often the only place that had it all under one roof like that. Other kind of game stores or hobby stores were kind of it was like usually a comic shop that also sold some board games, and maybe did some Magic, because that would have been new at the time too. Magic would have been a fresh thing, and so forth. So maybe they sold classic model kits like planes and trains and things. So Games Workshop did kind of, the concept of the store we have here is heavily built around what Games Workshop started all those years ago, and it has changed. They've since moved away from that model, because they realized that, look, we just need to sell lots of toys, and we don't need big spaces with tables. The fans or the gamers will figure that out on their own, and for the majority of the time we have. And so their stores have moved into smaller, more compact spaces that just house their products. Maybe they have a couple demo tables or small gaming section, and they have their little painting bar, and that's it. So because those are most Games Workshops, and even the old ones, the legacy ones, of like probably their leases have changed or they've moved. I know a classic one, the one that Chris and I worked at, was at a place called the Square One Mall or Shopping Center in the center of Mississauga, and that I think they used to have like 4 gaming tables. It was like 600 square feet or something, and then they moved the store. They moved it, and then I think it's got similar. Maybe it's like a little bigger, but then again, it has less tables.
Yeah,
It's kind of
it's definitely an ideological switch, right?
They moved to get lower rent and all those things. Yeah. But, anyway, so what has happened then is it's been left to places like us, independent stores, or just people running their own clubs.
And I'll just add, and they didn't do this like willy nilly. There was a lot of data to suggest.
Oh yeah.
That let's be real. Like the largest capture point in entering a new hobby is the first 2 years or first even year. So like nobody will spend more than they will generally than they will spend in their first 2 years. Any hobby to enter, right?
Yeah.
So the Games Workshop centers are built around that concept of like recruiting new people and capturing that initial burst of sales. And it's not like they're kicking people out after 2 years, but it's once you're kind of an established veteran hobbyist, you can keep shopping there, but you might kind of go look for something else after that point.
Yeah, they're kind of like, okay, you've got everything you need. Off you go and find your, they might argue, and there's some truth to it, that like you should be looking for, your own people that maybe friends or people that work within, I think. Now you might argue, well, what if there's no place to do that? I mean, that's fair. So this leads into like our greater discussion today, and like if you're in Europe, then you're kind of already used to this already. This is really a North American, I don't say problem, but phenomena, where because of the way our cities are and everything is built, it's all built on like lots of space, and people have space at home or whatever. Or retail space is not cheap actually. And it only comes in like big slices. You can't get like a little retail space. It's only like big slices. So people are used to the concept of like playing at the game store rather than having their own formal club on the side. Whereas you go to the UK or something and everything's club. So people are used to renting or getting together and renting a church or whatever basement or something once a month, etc., and just running the club there and then buying their minis wherever they want. So.
And that's a great foray into what we're going to talk about. But before we jump in completely, I was just going to also touch on, or maybe you can, is why we both think that why would other shops mostly cater to TCGs?
Oh yeah, I mean, so it's also the nature of the product, right? Like Warhammer or miniatures are not consumed at the same rate or type or way that the cards are. Cards are like little. It's more akin to like food or snacks that you're kind of like nibbling on all the time, every week, every couple times a week.
Yeah, definitely.
And and it's very easy to play lots of games of it because you just take it out of the packaging and play.
And generally, like TCG players take up way less space. Like you can fit in like a billion more into a tight spot.
Well, one 6x4 40K game is 6 players.
Is like 6 Magic players, and those generally speaking, people like that play cards are more used to sort of like paying for their space when they play. Like there's usually like fees attached to Friday Night Magic and these sort of things. They know that there's like a cost associated with playing as well.
They are, yeah. So it's like
easier to monetize.
It is. TCGs lend themselves or have lent themselves to this like weekly little subscription thing where you know that you're paying a little bit every week to go play. And it's a small buy-in, and you get your like sleeves or packs. It's like little purchases all the time.
Yeah.
And because of the set rotations and the evolving meta, and everything happens very rapidly too, because of how quickly it iterates, how many games get played, etc. So whereas Warhammer is the opposite of that. It's heavy up front, and then periodically more heavy like shots to the chest of big releases. You tend to like collect chunks of armies at a time, and then it takes months or if not years to like work through that, build it, paint it. So you may make big purchases and then not for a while. And even here at the store with our gaming, like we always tell everyone all the time that the gaming space is generally it's for customers is the phrase we use. And I don't expect people to necessarily be making large Warhammer purchases every single time they're here. That's unreasonable. But so it is a little bit of a different model. But so you do have to like think about it in those terms a little bit. But there's also a reason why we'll get into later why we don't think the pure. Like, especially with Wargaming, having lots of Wargame tables and running it as an event space is necessarily a great idea either.
Maybe we should. So right off the bat, you can see like and that's why I wanted to kind of contextualize things. Mm-hmm. Card games take up very little space in terms of players, so you can have a smaller store basically and like actually run big events. Whereas with tabletop games, having a small store, even like ours, maybe you can only fit a couple of tables. Yeah. And so you kind of can very quickly outgrow. And even even in plain economic terms, if you want to put a price value on the space you're using, it's much harder to look at a 4x6 gaming table for miniatures and quantify how much money that's making.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem, right? Is you have a harder time saying, okay, like we don't really commodify it in the same way that you would with TCGs. How do you actually fix a value to that in terms of the space it's using up, right?
Sure.
So getting into that, let's take a look and think about, okay, well, so can a business work if its focus is more on creating a big gaming space? Okay. Well, are there lots of examples of that?
I don't know. There's a few. Not in North America.
Yeah.
There's a few, but I think it's still heavily anchored by the Magic and the TCG games. That's so. To find an example where it's just purely miniatures, I can't think of one.
Of a big space, yeah. We have a local business that's going to be attempting it soon, so I'll probably have a much better evidential answer for you potentially in the next couple of years. But my initial reaction is like, okay, let's look at similar business models. The gaming cafe, right? So like this is a business model that's trying to commodify its space. So they basically charge like a transactional use fee. So you get in, you pay $5 an hour or whatever it is to use the space. But once again, generally board games take up a smaller space. There's no additional capital cost for like terrain and maintaining that sort of stuff. So like your upfront costs are like a little lower. And I think, generally speaking, because it's also a cafe, people are more amenable to like the idea of spending money when they go to just exist there. The problem, I think, the problem you're always going to run into with gamers, and this is like, even especially if you're drawing the example from the Warhammer store, like a lot of people are showing up to play at the Warhammer store. Okay, but it's free, right? So a lot of people are showing up to play for free. How do you necessarily take that concept and say it's going to work in a new commercial space, right?
Yeah, you have to have that expectation set right away. You almost have to have the price board on the as soon as you walk in, like a maybe like an escape room or something that says this is the hourly rate or the table rate. Maybe there's memberships that kind of give you a deal if you can buy them 6 months up or whatever. But you do have to be very like transparent. You can't be willy-nilly about it. You can't set some precedents where people feel like they can roll in and just kind of play for free or whatever. I think that's the tricky thing. You have to make it a regular.
There is one business that kind of reminds me of this, and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to get in trouble or anything. But they're a couple hours away from us, and this gentleman actually, like the person who asked this question, has a full-time job. Opened this particular business, and it's essentially a gaming hall. And they sell some, like they have a Warhammer account, but they basically order stuff in for people.
Right. And
they have, I think, a bar there as well. So they have like Smart Serve employees. That's a provincial thing in Canada we have to have.
It means you can serve booze.
You can serve booze. Yeah. So functionally this business works. However, I will caveat that with knowing the owner and knowing, through other people I know in the industry, and if this person has actually tried to sell this business a few times, not because it's not a viable business in the sense that they're making enough money to keep it open, but because it's a lot more work than originally they thought, right? Because once again, like commodifying a space to play games, if it's going to actually pay for itself, you have to sell memberships, you have to sell, or like pay per come out thing. But like if you think about it, it's a gym. Like gyms don't really want to have you pay every time you come.
No,
they want to know that they can pay their bills every month.
Every month, yes.
So the membership thing,
actually, gym is a perfect analogy.
Probably is what you want as a business model.
You're opening a Warhammer dojo or gym or whatever.
But even still, on top of that, to keep it viable, they have to run events every Saturday and Sunday forever.
Except to add to the gym analogy, but it's a gym. But then the employees not only have to be like around to like keep things running, but often. The food and beverage gets added on because you're like, well, gamers are going to eat and drink, and that's another little side business. But you often have, in the case of the example Chris gave, you end up having only a few employees, because they're the most expensive part of the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to keep the event running while also making a burger, while also serving it. Like, it's...
We've lived this before, yeah.
Right?
We've seen it in action,
it's
very tough.
It's very tough, yeah. It's a lot to ask, and you're going to have problems, here and there.
And I think the other thing is the expectation customers are going to have is, if it is a gym sort of membership style model, I think the expectation is going to be the hours are really, really flexible.
Yeah.
So your
you have to be open a
overheads
lot.
for labor are going to be very high. Like, people are going to want to play like late into every evening, probably.
Walk in at 9 p.m. and play or something.
Like, just like the gym, right?
Yeah.
So Jay and I were talking about this yesterday, and I think there's probably a better solution here that I think a lot of people don't think about, because, with our Western brains, we tend to think of everything in terms of, like, starting a new business venture, the hustle culture. How could I commodify this? I think there's like a non-commodifiable answer to this, which is probably a lot simpler and more elegant, which is like to explore community spaces.
Yeah. You should just rent a space, once a month or something, or whatever it is, and collect the money, and just, once you have a group of people that do that, and they can, obviously you need a bit of get it going. Like, you need a certain critical mass to make it work. But I think, like I said, this is kind of how things are done in Europe or whatever.
Yeah.
You could probably find, even in small towns, some of these places aren't full all the time, so they'll make good deals. I remember Chris and I used to run, before Lords of War Store, we had Lords of War tournament, and we'd run it at Legion Hall, and they were happy to host this. And the price just kept getting better and better every year, because they were just like, this is great, you guys come, you don't make a mess, you
clean up after
yourselves.
Yeah.
And
it was like a few $100 extra in their pocket, for no work.
And it was guaranteed kind of easy money. They didn't have to like do any solicitation to get bookings and whatever. So I think there are local community areas in every town that would work with you. You might have to like work out. There's going to be someone or a few people are going to have to take the lead, and there's going to be a bit of overhead up front, which is going to be a little painful at first, whether it's you may have to buy some plywood boards or some gaming mats. But if it's all owned by the club, then, you can,
maybe you set up like a little like co-op, right? Like maybe you have to go see a lawyer, but like at the end of the day, there's going to be work involved in getting this right, but it's far less work than starting a whole business, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, right? So I think like looking at rec centers, veteran halls, libraries, community centers.
I mean, I see this
churches.
with lots of things. Like my wife is, partakes in a book club, or there's like tons of little activities that happen in these places that it's like a small fee. Yeah. Every time people come and visit, and they can run it. Maybe they start once a month, and then it builds up to more times a month. And
a lot of these little clubs have they literally like elect like a board, right? Like they actually elect like a treasurer and like a chief officer or whatever.
Actually, the most famous example here in Ontario are the Lord of the Rings guys. They have a commissioner, they have a treasurer, they have elections, and they rotate.
The thing is, if you're going to take money from people,
it's pretty amazing.
It's a good thing to do, right? It's the sort of fiduciary thing to do, right? To make sure everything's above board and clean and So that would I think that would be our suggestion, is to not to discourage you from like trying to open a business if that's what you really have your heart set on. Just do your due diligence. Like, make sure you are quantifying things the way we kind of laid it out. Like, how much money does this 4x6 have to make you a month? Think of it in plain terms like that.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to lease something for a year probably. Like, places don't want you. No commercial business with a month or whatever.
Even a year is kind of low.
Even a year is low. Usually they want
3 to 5 is kind of normal in the
And then the grander you make, the more everything ratchets up, because now you need more tables, you need staff, you need security. I don't know. Like, it just goes on and on. And so it sounds easy, but I don't know. The commenter did. Again, I don't know. We don't know who this person is, and I'm trying to I have no idea. I think they also kind of made it. They wanted to be mostly just like
a bit hands off, just be a capital investor, which you can still do that with a co-op, right? Like where you if you have in your community, if you have some people. Oh, I know John is awesome at making terrain. This guy is great at organizing people together. You know, put people. This is why cooperation is so great with humans. Like everyone has their own skill set. Like build a group of people that can get a project done. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be massive to start. Like it could just be as small as a dozen people or something. And
sure.
then, but from our experience running events and things like that, like Chris said, it's the unique thing about the war games is the table size is the biggest hurdle because so you're either going to need the simplest, quickest way is you're going to need folding tables, and folding tables are heavy, clunky. You're gonna have to store them somehow.
Well, yeah, like this is why your best bet is a place like that has them for you, basically.
Ideally, has some that you can just use.
Yeah, which a lot of places do.
Yeah, a lot of events, some sort of these community centers, etc., do have them. And then and the mats, like it's expensive and
and like you got to store this stuff, right? Like the storage, the tubs of terrain and the mat, the gaming mats, like inevitably have to go to someone's house. After gaming night or whatever.
Too, like maybe part of maybe if someone wants to join the club, like maybe they got to supply a bin of terrain or something. I don't know, like that or that has to be strongly encouraged to, if you want it to work, like everyone has to chip in, and that keeps it like we said, like relatively cheaper. It means people don't have to commit to like these crazy memberships or whatever. They can just kind of come and go when they can, and you're gonna have your regulars that are there every week, and you're gonna have some guys that only come once in a while. But it is probably, at least to start. I mean, maybe it grows and gets like really, maybe you have 30, 40 people that come all the time, and then you can start looking at a more formal, maybe bigger, more formal space that's properly done. But I would start in small for sure.
Yeah, so that's our answer. Hopefully we went into enough depth. If you have some crazy I want to open a store question, hit us up. But check us out on Patreon first. Like and subscribe our video. We do 2 of these a week, so if you're just tuning in for the first time and you enjoyed it, continue to check us out, and subscribing is the best way to see our videos. Until next time, take care.
Thanks.